All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Alive and Well's December Learning Community Conversation. I'm Danielle Small. I am the Community Activation Manager for Alive and Well in the Kansas City region, and I'm just really happy to be in space with you all for our last conversation of the year. It's crazy that we're already in December, almost Christmas. I don't know about you guys, but I don't even have a present brought yet. But we'll get there. This conversation will really be to highlight the work we did this year with our learning community conversations, as well as to have our CEO just talk about our visions and hope for the 2024 year. And so I'm going to throw in the chat box our web link. And this link is our website to our Culture Competency Collective. And so will show you all of our virtual platforms we did this past year and even the year before. And so I'm just going to give a brief just outline of all the conversations we had and the attendance and just a little bit of data behind each conversation. So let me pull this up and make sure we have this one. All right, so if you can see that website, our first one was January 25th, and that was a virtual platform. And so that topic was responding to trauma to create equity in healthcare. And we had 34 in attendance. We had 3 guest speakers. So we had Patty Davis, Allison Williams, and Christian Simpson speak at that conversation. And then our next one was in February 23rd. That was also a virtual platform, and our topic was Achieving Black Wellness by Eliminating Health Disparities. And our guest speaker for that conversation was Jermaine, who is a part of our staff here at Alive and Well. And we had 43 in attendance that day. Moving on, in March, that was our first. So if you see on the website, there is not a March platform there. And so that one was our first in-person conversation, and that topic was the journey to equity and where we go from here. And so our guest speakers were Teresa Cummins, Carla Gibson, Andrea Piscina. Hopefully I didn't mess that up, but those are actually our funders, and we had 21 in attendance that day. And so if you all know, COVID really stopped our organization from doing our in-person conversations. And so that was our way to pivot back into that. And we actually were excited to have that number of in attendance that day. Moving on was April 27th, and that was a virtual conversation. And that topic was resolutions for community healing. And so we had guest speakers, Quanah Thompson and Angela Brown, and we had 59 in attendance that day. Moving on to May was another virtual platform, and that topic was youth mental wellness. And we had Elizabeth from Kids Under 21 be our guest speaker, and we had 44 in attendance that day. Then in June, we did not have a conversation, or actually, I take that back. In June, we had our next in-person platform, and that was in Kansas City, Missouri. And that topic was non-clinical aspect of our community healing. And so we had 2 guest speakers on call, or in person, sorry, you guys, in person that day. In Kansas City, and we had 10 in attendance. And then moving on in September, we had our Just Health Zero Health Disparities, the promise of zero health disparities, and that was our conversations across 3 regions. And so I don't have the exact number of who was in attendance that day. I know Jen is on call, but we had our guest speaker from the author of Just Health, Dana Matthews, who was able to live stream all three regions as she spoke. And then we had panelists in Kansas City, St. Louis, and Naboo Hill. And then in October, we had another virtual opportunity, and that topic was health and education. And we had two guest speakers, Dr. Mary Easelman and Rachel Pedigo, and they are both from Operation Breakthrough, and we had 34 in attendance that day. And then last month, we had our virtual conversation with the faith-based Blue Holiday, and Jermaine Alberti, who is a part of our team, spoke, and we had 28 in attendance that day. And I do want to say with each conversation, we had different organizations represented throughout the state, so St. Louis, Boo Hill, and Kansas City. And then we have this conversation that we will upload on that website by the end of this week. So I know that was a lot there. Does anybody have any questions about any of the conversations we had throughout 2023? Jen, I know you're on call. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Danielle. I think it's been a year of us growing and sharing across the state. So I see a whole lot of familiar names on here from folks all over the state. So we thank you for being with us this morning as we talk about what's ahead for us.
Thank you, Jen. I'm now going to move pass the floor over to Riisa, who is our interim CEO for Regional Health Commission. And before she speaks, I do want to just highlight the work she has done in her career. So Riisa Rawlins has served in leadership positions and as an independent consultant for various nonprofits in the St. Louis region since relocating to the area in 2004. She has over 20 years experience in culture competency and stigma reduction, integration of primary care and behavior health, and positive youth development. Her passion for relationship building is evident in all that she does. Before becoming interim Chief Executive Officer of Regional Health Commission, Riisa served as the Chief Operations and Strategy Officer. I will now turn the floor over to Riisa.
Good morning, everyone. It's so wonderful to be in community with each of you and nice to see your names, if not your lovely faces, on this beautiful December morning. I'm going to share kind of the tour that we've been doing just to give everyone a little insight into what we're doing and how we're envisioning next steps. And my hope is that at the end of this conversation, you will be as excited as I am about the strategies forward and see some opportunities to continue to partner and engage in the work ahead. So I have, Danielle, would you like me to share slides or do you want to, you'll share them? Okay, so I have some slides that I'll share with you. Excuse the, like I said, we've been doing the tour. So we've spoken to our Board of Commissioners, our Community Advisory Board, and our Patient Advisory Board. And so one of the things that we are really intentional and strategic about is ensuring that we're sharing the same information so that we can get a breadth of feedback and wisdom from those who are sharing their expertise from different perspectives, lenses, and places in navigating the systems. So the next slide, I will just share a little bit about who I am. For those of you who do not know me, I think it's important to introduce myself as I have the privilege of partnering with you and having the honor of helping to lead this work forward. And so my leadership philosophy being about integrity. The thing that I most desire to be said of me in my presence and in my absence is that I led with integrity, and that regardless of whether I was behind closed doors or in a room of many, that my principles and my values were consistent, that my words and my actions were aligned and true. And so for me, what does leadership mean? What does it mean to lead? First, it begins with listening. no one is an expert on their own, right? We are informed, inspired, and moved by what we're able to and willing to hear from others, from the wisdom of those who are around us, regardless of where they come from or where they're stationed in life. I always talk about some of the greatest lessons that I have learned have actually been from my children, right? As I teach, I'm also learning, right? And to evaluate. So it's really important for us to listen with a critical ear, to really be astute observers of the environment around us, of this, taking into mind the socio-political context, taking into mind all of the various inputs of knowledge and information to evaluate the context of the information we're receiving and how that the information that we're receiving is influenced and informed by people, circumstances, situations, worldviews, et cetera. And align. For me, it is really critical, again, that my words and my actions are always aligned with my core values and with that of the work that we're doing. So the guiding principles that inform our institutions and our work, to make sure that when I do a constant self-check to make sure that what I do and what I say and how I say and do it is in alignment with those values. And then finally, decisive action. I am a person who loves ideas and thoughts and frameworks and theories, but those are really only as good as our ability to apply them in real, practical, tangible ways to the lives that we're all experiencing, to the circumstances that we're all encountering. So not staying in that assessment ideation phase, but using all of the information and the partnership and expertise to really inform what actions we take forward. I like to call this season of my life and work my season of failing forward. And I know we don't really like to associate ourselves with failure. In my mind, it's the doing and the trying where the learning exists. And so even if we don't get it exactly right the first time, and it is rare that you get it exactly right the first time, we learn from that and we move forward. And by doing so, we give others permission to do the same. And so that is how I try to orient myself, is to not just talk about it, but to actually be bold enough and audacious enough to act on it. And again, as you continue to listen and evaluate, you amend and reform and continue to move forward. So that is who I am. That is who I endeavor to always be. And I invite you in this space to be in community with me, excuse me, and to call me in, so that if I have a blind spot and my words and actions aren't aligned with how with who I aspire to be, to call me in so that we can continue on this process and this journey together. So that's enough about me. So now I will transition over to talking about what we're here to talk about today. What I'm really excited about is the work, what it looks like, what it means, and how we move it forward. So our vision is the achievement of zero health disparities. I will say that we talk long and hard. Y'all know when it comes to writing vision and mission statements, that always takes way longer than one thinks it should. And you go back and forth about words. The thing for me that I love about this is that it's audacious and we say what we mean. You hear a lot of work that talks about minimizing or lessening or decreasing, but we are really clear that any disparity in health access, experience, and outcome is too much disparity, right? Because in the numbers, there are people, right? And so if we're saying that there's just a small percentage, there's just a small gap, 2%, and that 2% is our folks' loved ones. And so how do we really envision what we truly want is equity and experience, access, and outcomes across the board. Our mission, we're still working on refining language because it's still too many words, says the person who loves words, but it's connecting the community and systems to co-create innovative solutions. So for me, the key takeaway is it's not just what we want, it's how we get there. We don't get to zero health disparities if we don't have power sharing between community and systems. if we're not intentional about paying attention to and addressing the social and political determinants of health that create and reinforce the unjust outcomes that we see across our systems. And so that's really the key to our vision and mission. And so the wheel that you'll see beneath is how we're right now conceptualizing and refining as we go along, moving through that process. So we talk about innovative strategies and what does it mean to have innovative strategies to get us to zero health solutions? Why innovation? Because what we've done has gotten us to where we are. And if we're really going to get to zero health disparities, it's going to have to be something that's different, that's creative. And if we're going to get to something that's different and creative, it's going to be in partnership, co-created and led by community and folks who are closest to the issues because they're navigating these health and social safety net systems, those who are on the front lines of providing care and support, those who are leaders in the space who have decision-making and funding authority for these creative solutions. And so we're thinking about what does that look like in the areas where we're located. So in St. Louis, in Kansas City, in the Boot Heel, what does it look like to have those hubs of innovation? Why in those areas? Because we understand that a lot of change really happens locally. Like there's a localized power, right? And being able to understand the context and innovate to create strategies where you know who the players are and how to connect and what needs to happen, who needs to be around the table. And then there is power in building your base so that you can say, hey, we noticed this in our community. We see you have similar issues in our community. Well, how can we learn from one another so that we can then develop a statewide agenda policy-wise to be able to move some of this work forward? And so that's how we're thinking about innovation to advance justice, health justice, and equity across the board. So if you look at the outside of the circle, that's the four strategies that we're considering. This is how we move the work forward. Activation and healing is really all about increasing knowledge and capacity. How do we ensure that the systems, the institutions, the initiatives that exist across our systems and across our geographies have the resources now and knowledge that are required to both operate in the present in ways that allow for trauma-informed, equity-centered systems and processes, and that allow for us to imagine and expand what that looks like and how that shows up in spaces that bring healing to individuals, families, communities, institutions, and systems. Then you'll see the research and evaluation, which is really about developing and answering questions. For far too long, research has come from ivory towers of academia, where folks have decided, this is really interesting and I'm curious about this. And so let me go do this research on community. And we are positing that that is exactly backwards, right? And the model that we are advancing is community-led, participatory research and evaluation, so that the research questions are actually generated from communities. What are the things that we are seeing in our communities? What are the things that we are curious about? What are the things that we want to see resolved? And then rather than having academic institutions come in and ask things they're curious about, the community then will say, okay, now here's what we're interested in. And the researchers will then have to partner with community to advance that research. We are even right now in the process of discovering what it takes to build a community-based IRB. So the communities are not, the IRB is not housed in the research institution, but it's actually housed within community, so that every stage of the process, from developing the question to the research model, to implementation of the research, to the evaluation, and even to the publication, that community is not, there are not subjects, but rather partners in the process, and even co-authors as we disseminate the research that comes from this information, or from the information that comes from this research, the data that comes from this research, and using it to help transform the communities and systems that we interact with. And then you'll see storytelling and accountability. We used to think about that and talk about that as our data bucket, but we were like, no, if we're really intent about saying what we mean, it's not just about data, it's about how we use it. Right? It's about how we are thinking about and talking about and experiencing data We are, and I wish I remembered, I'm gonna have to take some time and just go through my notes and remember who said this, but I heard recently someone say that there should never be numbers without stories or stories without numbers. And that's the way we're thinking about data, that it can't just be quantitative data, charts and graphs, because what does that mean? What is the context of the numbers that we're seeing? And so the richness of the stories and the experience is what makes the data meaningful, relevant, and contextualized. How can we then use that information, that storytelling through numbers and experience to then ensure that there is accountability for what we're seeing in these stories, to center a people first narrative so we never get lost in the numbers and we understand the work that we're doing is for, about, and with people, and that we are accountable for the things that we commit to in the communities that we are in partnership with. And then finally, you'll see policy in practice. And that's advancing health in all policy. What does that mean? The Regional Health Commission historically has had a great measure of success in small P policy change. What do I mean by that? Interacting with institutions and systems and identifying barriers in care, barriers for access for people who are uninsured and underinsured, and convening folks in a room to say, hey, here's what we're hearing from folks. Here's what makes it hard to go from this place to the other, or to get this service or this resource. And so what can we put in place? What policies are in the way that don't have to be there, that we can change in order to make the systems easier to navigate? More recently, we have gotten into the big P policy space, where we're doing a lot of advocacy, where we're paying attention to the legislative agenda and calendars, what's moving, what isn't, where we're developing relationships with our delegates, both statewide and on the federal level, to understand what health, behavioral health, equity-centered policy is moving forward. Long term, ideally, we would love to be in a space where we are able to develop, write, propose, find sponsorship for that policy. Work in the present context, creating pathways for people to engage in that process, in the political process, at their areas of expertise and comfort, whether that be going to Jeff to give testimony, whether it be picking up the phone to call their representative, whether it be through advocacy and action alerts, but looking at all the different levels and ways and mechanisms for folks to be able to engage in policy in practice, because the things that we're talking about that bring about that healing, that and allow us to move towards zero health disparities, our outcomes won't be transformed if we don't look at the political determinants and change the policy that undergirds and reinforces the issues that we care deeply about for the communities that we care deeply about. So I'm going to pause there because that was a lot. And that is the whole breadth and scope of what we're thinking about, how we're thinking about this work. And then I'll go into like more minute detail. But I just wanted to pause to see if anyone had any just initial off the top comments or any questions. And I'm happy to answer those for you before moving on. I can't tell because I can't see your faces. I can't see if your eyes are glazed over. Okay.
Riisa, because this space has really been about community learning, and we've taken a lot of the advice of folks who've participated in these conversations, I just encourage people to think about what learning opportunities do we need to have collectively together in the new year to make this kind of work possible that Riisa is describing. So any feedback you have for us about the work that Riisa is describing, or questions or clarification, because it is new, but also just ideas for learning opportunities that we can help facilitate for all of us in this journey together.
And feel free to use the chat box.
No.
Paula, did you have anything to say? I think she unmuted.
Riisa, I know something that comes up a lot in our conversations is that it's the St. Louis Regional Health Commission. And this work, we're talking about bringing Kansas City and the Boot Heel together. Can you just talk for a minute about why that strategy is so important to the Health Commission that has the name St. Louis in front of it right now?
We live in Missouri. And if you hadn't noticed, I'm sure you have, I don't think you'd be around this table if you hadn't, this is a very scarlet state. Because the change that we are talking about is a systems level seismic shift in how we think about and approach access and outcomes and experience, we understand that it can't just be individual or institutional. We understand that if we're really, again, going to get to the outcome of zero health disparities, that we have to consider the factors that create, perpetuate, and reinforce that disparity. In order to do so, we have to address the political determinants of health. What are the frameworks, systems, policies that have been created and that we don't even think about because they're just the fabric of our society, and it's just part and parcel of the water that we swim in? How do we identify those policies and work in ways to be able to change those policies so that even as we're working on mindset and heart set, we're able to have policies in place that make it extremely inconvenient and disadvantage folks from acting on or acting in ways that continue to perpetuate disparity. If we're talking about policy change at that level, we cannot in St. Louis say, hey, this is what we think in St. Louis in our scarlet state of Missouri. It really takes us being able to identify those overlaps and those synergies with our partners, colleagues, friends across the state. Because what we're finding is that we have a lot of similar issues, and that if we're able to spend time in deep relationship, that we would be able to find ways to articulate that storytelling piece, tell the story in a way that resonates across the state. Particularly what I'm most moved by is the connection between rural communities and urban communities when we think about access and experience. Though it may look a little different, though the factors may be nuanced, we have some similar experiences. And so what are the ways that we can work together across the state in order to advance policy that then allows each of us to speak, again, talking about global or statewide, and then local, because a lot of politics is down ballot, y'all. It's local, and it's 2024, so I feel like I have to be on my soapbox about that. Like, how do we then articulate that in ways that are meaningful and draw direct connections for folks who are representing a district and that is their lens? And we feel like we'll be far more effective in being able to advance policy that really is going to have lasting impact and be transformative to systems if we do it across the state rather than solely in our regions. So I say, which is not to say that there's not space for local politics, but oftentimes you'll see that it's reinforced when localities are able to create those changes and then create examples that are then taken to a statewide level, so we can amplify and magnify the systemic and policy changes that we need to see.
Thank you. I think it's exciting to be able to think across. And for those of you who've been part of our steering committee in Kansas City or St. Louis or the Boot Heel, you've seen the power of us talking together and the kinds of opportunities that we see for moving towards progress. One of the things, Riisa, I know we wanted to spend time with the group today, is really thinking about what are the things that make us think this is possible in Missouri, that make us think that we can get to zero health disparities in Missouri and really say what we're saying we're going to do. And so I think there are things that all of us have probably witnessed this year that give us that hope and possibility for the future. So I don't know, Riisa, if you want to speak to something that you've seen recently that gives you that hope for 2024 and beyond.
Well, first of all, the conversation. We're having conversations now that when I first came to this wouldn't even have been a possibility. Folks were not open to any of these conversations. And the fact that folks across systems are getting in rooms and having conversations about equity, right? And talking about like health justice, what is that? What does that mean? Now we're grappling. We have a ways to go, and we're still trying to wrap our minds around what exactly does it mean and how exactly, right? What are the handlebars for us moving this forward? But there's a shift in the conversation that for me is energizing and inspiring. I spoke a lot beginning in March of 2020, right? On what did the pandemic highlight for us, right? It wasn't that all of us were unaware, right? There were a lot of us who had been doing this work around access and around equity for a long time, and having marginal or incremental success in moving the conversation forward. But one of the things that the pandemic did was make it really clear about how deeply embedded the structural issues were that created disparate or unjust health experiences, access, and outcomes. It created a circumstance where we could not look away. We could not ignore it. And so I would say often, in all of the hurt, in all of the pain, and the collective grief and trauma that we have experienced and are continuing to experience as a result of COVID, that this creates an opportunity for not just a moment, but a movement, so that all of the lives and the futures and the hope that was lost can be used as an opportunity to not be in vain, but to demonstrate this is a pivot point for us to be able to move forward. So I do think that COVID created in many ways an opportunity for us to have the conversation more boldly, to have the conversation in different ways. It was like the die, right? Like when you go to get, they're looking at your GI and they want to look inside your body and to see what's wrong and where are there tears, are there leaks, what's happening? And you have to drink that nasty stuff so that the dye is in your body, and then they do the x-ray to see, what needs to be fixed and where the harm is. And that's kind of what COVID was, guys. It was like the dye that showed us where all the pain points were that had been there. They'd been there for a really long time, but we did not have the will, right, or the collective buy-in to be able to address it. And so I think it gave us an opportunity to talk about and think about it in very different ways, and to have us all care in very different ways, because I don't know a person who's not been touched by or impacted by that grief and trauma. And so now how do we, again, make it so that it's not in vain, but that we are able to save additional lives and transform systems so that we so that it looks very different should another, like whatever else comes down the pike, we'll meet it in a different way, because we understood this moment and use it as an opportunity to transform how we interact and care for one another. Yay, a hand. I don't want to mispronounce your name. Donna?
Luana. Hi, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I just want to share something. I hope this is relevant, but I want to share something that I'm excited about in listening to these comments this morning. One has to do with, I think, giving us hope against the apathy that a lot of all of the communities are feeling. That's one. in the last year that there are a number of registered voters. But it's not just the transportation issue that's keeping people from going to vote. And there's something about what you're talking about, like the way we're moving, that gives me hope as to how we can energize a base and actually get people to be interested in understanding why it's important to invest in their own health and that somebody's really going to listen to them. The other thing is that I'll be interested to understand and to get more information on how these institutions, how to get the institutions to move. Advocacy has become almost a buzzword. And but there's a still but, right? There's this idea that, oh, but if we go too far, we're going to lose our funding, or we will upset part of our base, and so what I'm hearing you talk about as far as especially learning communities, I think there's this space where we will start to understand better how to engage at all of these different levels, locally, but also ways to be able to help institutions to engage and not sit on the sidelines, giving I don't want to say excuse, giving this narrative that, but we can only go this far, we can't. There's got to be some way that all of us can start to have these conversations systemically if we're going to get to zero disparities, because they say they're behind you and what you're wanting to do, or what we're wanting to do collectively. So I am looking forward to ways where, speaking to Jennifer's point about learning communities and ways to be able to start to support movement, I'm looking forward to what that looks like and how to get past these hurdles that have plagued us for so long. But we know they're possible, because even during COVID, we saw some of these people start playing together in order to get resources out and to deal with public health. It's possible. How can we learn to live in that way on a regular basis? And I feel like the work is going to help us to go in that direction. So I just wanted to share that level of excitement that I haven't felt in a long time. So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I love it. And I share your excitement, especially because y'all, 2024 is about to get real. And we are going to need now more than, I was trying to say more than we ever have before, but like at a level that the heightened level, the highest that we've needed this engagement, we need it now, because we don't know what's ahead. But what we do know is that we have community that is ready to activate. And if we are able to create pathways, opportunities, and excitement, if we're able to tell the stories in a way that folks are like, I get it, I see it, I know why it matters, I know why I care, and I know what I can do about it. So for me, that's the thing that is really encouraging about being able to have community and systems partnerships, because there are things that institutions can't say, because we all have mortgages or children to feed and rent or whatever. We have lives to live, and the bills don't stop because, however, when we have initiatives such as this, right, you can do something extra organizationally, like outside of the confines of your role in your organization. You can know that you have partners and allies who are carrying the torch. I talk a lot about the difference between playing chess and hockey. And we have an opportunity, because of community and systems partnerships, to do both. There are certain rooms and tables that some folks will never have access to. And so those who have the privilege to sit at the table, who hold the responsibility of this shared agenda of advancing justice, need to be positioned at those tables. So I don't want you to be in there playing hockey and getting kicked out of the table, because then you're not representing and amplifying what we're trying to move forward. In the same token, there are some folks who are really good at rolling up the sleeves in the streets, galvanizing folks, organizing, marching, whatever it is. And I have I'm of the persuasion that it takes both. And what's been missing is the deep partnership and the alignment of our strategy and our messaging. So can we walk with the same agenda even though we have to have different strategies because we're sitting in different places? And can we create pathways and opportunities that no matter where you're sitting, you can find your level of power and influence and engage in the way that is most meaningful for you? Because the boardroom ain't for everybody, and the streets aren't for everybody. But can we make sure that all of that is represented? Because that's how that multi-pronged strategy is how we move this work forward. I'm sorry, I get really excited about this. Like, this is soapbox for me.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Riisa, was there anything else from that presentation you wanted to share?
Maybe the pyramid might be helpful because I want folks to know how we're thinking about who we are. And again, how, as I started the conversation talking about who I want to, how I always want to show up, this is how we as RHC and Alive and Well always want to show up in community. So I do want to share this with you. I love this little brand pyramid. I struggle with that because branding is such a loaded term. However, when we think about who we are, our personality, our identity, and what we want to accomplish, we had a lot of conversations with our stakeholders across the board, community members, our patient advisory board, our community advisory board, provider services. We had conversations across regions and across systems. We've had a lot of conversations with our stakeholders that are community consultants and on steering committees to try to understand, who do you see us as? And what is your hope for who we become together? And so that's the result. This is the result that you see before you that I'll quickly walk you through. And I'll start at the base of the pyramid and the operational truths that bring us together. As the bi-directional partnership, I know I've said it a number of times, I can't overstate how important it is that us coming in with this shared power model in our decision-making. And we really believe that that is one of the core values that allows this work to be meaningful and gives it the opportunity to be really transformational. And then thinking about like a purposeful merger and growth, not just doing things because it seemed like, oh, this is fun, let's take on something else. No, but thinking about if we're going to get to zero health disparities, we're going to have to, and Jennifer asked the question earlier, think about how do we do that incorporating the social and political determinants of health. We can't just think about health if we're getting to zero health disparities. It may seem counterintuitive to some, but I imagine for those of you sitting around this table, you understand that that is the case, that if we're not thinking about how all of those systems interact and influence our ability to pursue all that is needed for us to achieve and experience wellness and the best quality of life and longevity, we don't do that just talking about my doctor's appointment and how I get to my doctor's appointment. And so this merger allows us to think about all of the things that impact it, and that we don't get to sustained systemic change that heals not just individuals, but heals the systems that they're still a part of if we're not thinking across regions and locations. So across systems, across geographies. The thing that we heard a lot from our stakeholders was the proven track record. Like, these are two entities who don't just talk about it, but have demonstrated progress towards moving the needle, right? And so how much further can we move that needle if we're moving it together? And so to get to just policy changes, we have a little bit of we're developing some muscle and some skill set there, and let's advance that. And then the practical expertise, right? So we have a history of developing innovative strategies and solutions. And as we deepen our partnerships and our relationship across systems and communities, how much more can we develop those innovative strategies and solutions that move us forward? And so these are the reasons that we believe that this vision of zero health disparities is in fact possible and achievable, I dare say, in our lifetime. And then the functional benefit is community-informed health policies and programs. We have health policies and programs all the time. We've been doing that for a very long time. What we haven't done for the duration of this time is actually having them be community-informed. How much more successful can these policies and programs be if we are not just coming from systems or institutional level knowledge, but really understanding the context and the experience and using that expertise and that wisdom to inform program and policy development and implementation and evaluation. And then the emotional benefit then of that is that deep trust and active inclusion. Communities that have historically and systemically been marginalized have, with much validity, developed a deep distrust, earned distrust of systems, right? You don't gain trust by telling people to trust you. You gain trust by showing up. You gain trust by opening the door, by creating a table and creating space at the table and actively listening and engaging folks and acting on and demonstrating that what you're saying, your feedback, your experience, your expertise is valued and that you can see how it's being used to develop the process, the strategy moving forward. And that's how deep trust continues to be built over time as relationship is built over time as we continue to partner and do this work together, which then leads to the social benefit of healing through systemic change and unbiased outcomes. So if we ever get to healing, it will be because first we acknowledge that harm has happened and that harm must be repaired, and that and our commitment and demonstration of always showing up to create the systemic change that is required to get us to just outcomes, just access, just experience. And so that is the social benefit. And that leads us to our personality. Who do we want to be? Who do we want to be known as? For us, as we were thinking about what does RHC and Alive and AWC bring to this conversation, it's the and, leaning into that and the diversity of expertise, experience, presence, partnerships, and relationships. What does that bring? That we can be both collaborative and passionate, knowledgeable and supportive, focused and relatable, right? So it's like practical and pragmatic because there's a space for that, but it's also visionary and inclusive. That's thinking about the communities that we are in partnership with and how we get to those outcomes. It's so leaning into the diversity and complexity of who we are, which then leads us to real progress, not just words, not just talking about it, but actually moving the needle together towards that vision of zero health disparities. This is what we want folks to think about and to believe when they see us, when they engage with us, when they partner with us. Any initial thoughts, questions?
Going once, going twice. Well, Riisa, thank you so much for taking time this morning to really outline our vision and goals for 2024 with the merger, and Jennifer as well. We have about 9 minutes. I'm going to put, well, anyway, is there anything else, Jen or Riisa, you want to share? Sorry.
No, I just want to thank everyone for their continued engagement in the work over the years. And I think as we move forward, we just invite you to be in conversation with us, that if things come up that are confusing or that you want more information about, or you want to be part of, please reach out to any of us. And we welcome that additional engagement moving forward. And I think there'll be a lot of exciting things in the new year for all of us to do together.
Thanks, Jen. Riisa, do you have any last words? No?
No, just thank you for allowing the privilege of having this conversation with you all today, and I look forward to working with you more in the future.
And as we end, I'm going to put in the chat box just our evaluation for this conversation. This just really helped us to just get feedback, just to create better presentations, topics, and things like that. So if you take some time, please fill that out. In addition, we'll be sending information all to you all for the 2024 year and what our hopes look like for the innovation hubs and the learning community conversation. So please, you'll be hearing from me in the new year. And as we end, I just hope you all have a great holiday break. I know some of you guys have a big to-do list to get the stuff done. And if you don't, I hope you just really take some time for yourself and spread love to everyone, and just happy holidays, and we will see you all in 2024. So thank you all.
Thank you.